rapidly getting better. And so it's a really exciting time to see how much these things improve over the next couple of years, because I personally think that at the rate of current change, that we are going to have like kind of mind-blowing capabilities.
Like DNA strands on a fascinating roller coaster of endless learning, experimentation, and discovery of technology, where the destination is not the end and the journey is the most fun. This is the Helical Brew. With your hosts, Mike, Sura, Jeff, and Elizabeth.
Welcome, Helical Brew listeners, to the kickoff of our AI Thought Leaders series, and we're really excited to bring on AI Thought Leader Nick Edwards, the CEO and founder of ReadySetPotato. Should I say co-founder or founder? What's the
founder,
and
co-founder, either works.
It's Potato AI, yeah.
Yeah, ReadySetPotato.com is the website. So
right. Well, and full credit. That is one catchy, because as soon as Mustafa said
I love it.
I was like, that's awesome.
I was like on LinkedIn looking you up as soon as he said that.
Thank you.
We need more to just link that in, especially when top-level domains, the shorter ones are so hard to get.
Is there swag? I love swag.
When we meet at El Rig, I'll have to give you some swag. We have some stickers.
We love swag.
Yeah. There's some fun stuff there. I mean, the first question is always, why did you name it Potato? So I'll just ask it for you.
Please do.
The name Apple was already taken, and it's like the classic kids experiment where you hook up a light bulb or use a potato as a battery for an electrical circuit.
Got the box handy too.
It's catchy. Yeah.
Totally.
It's catchy. Nobody forgets the name.
And Apple was taken.
Apple was taken, so we had to go with potato.
and maybe Apple Intelligence could offer, at some point say, well, hey Apple, or hey Siri, what's the best way to do AI for your lab? They'll say, well, potato then.
Yeah, potato's the best way.
It's going to be a verb.
And you couldn't use Beats because, well, that's taken by Apple.
Yeah. That's right.
Spelled incorrectly, but
it was vigorously defended in copyright court before, and then it became basically Fort Knox after it got bought by Apple. So, well, good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast, by the way.
Pleasure to have you, Nick.
Yeah.
Pleasure to have you. So we're titling this episode, Will AI Replace Scientists? Automating Science with Nick Edwards. However, I think this is going to be a journey, not only through, we'd love to hear about your background and how you arrived at where you're at today, but we really want to dig into Potato AI, because I think this is an area that is just so talked about in the industry, where being better scientists by leveraging tools that can frankly outthink us, and do what they do best, right? I mean, obviously you've got to plant the seed of where you want something to go as a tool, but we want to learn from you on how you're enabling scientists with the tool that you've created.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk about it. And is it helpful to give a little bit of background on
Intro.
What we do? Yeah. So, I mean, the big picture vision that we're trying to go after is closed loop, autonomous science. And so that includes like hypothesis planning. It includes building out protocols, connecting to like running tools, whether that's like computational tools for like doing simulations, like in silico work, or running lab automation, doing the analysis and feeding that back into the next iteration of the hypothesis. That's the vision for closed loop science, right? And a lot of people have had this for years. I started thinking about it when I was a PhD student. So I'm a bit of a nerd, part of the reason why we call it why I'm interested in circuits is because I studied neuroscience for my PhD and postdoc, and it was incredibly manual work. It was like every single day I would go in and I'd make brain slices, and I would record from single neurons with doing patch clamp electrophysiology. It's like the most manual type of experimentation you can do. Most people give up on it because it's like hard. And I kind of was about 3 years into graduate school and didn't really have a lot in terms of publications, and I kind of had to, do a bit of an audible. And one day I was recording from these cells, and I saw this kind of weird blip in the data, and I was kind of trying to figure out what is that. And I was trying to you use pharmacology, drugs to try and block these receptors, and nothing's working. I get like 6 weeks into this project and, about ready to give up on it, right? And a friend that I worked in the lab with made a suggestion, like use this specific drug, and I did it, and it worked. And we published a pretty high-profile paper based off of this. We discovered a potential like drug target for treating cocaine addiction, and the big takeaway for me from that was like, I was kind of lucky that a friend came by and like had better knowledge of the literature than me. And I think about like all the experiments, all the discoveries that are not being currently made right now that could be if we had tools that had better knowledge of the literature, had the ability to actually run and execute on experiments. And so I think that's basically the vision that we're going after for the future. I really see it as, we'll dig into a bunch of these topics, I'm sure, more, but I see it as a massive opportunity for human AI collaboration that, we're literally, to me, at the beginning of the next scientific revolution. And I think, building these things responsibly, building them, making them robust and reliable and reproducible, that's kind of the goal. And so, that's a little bit about us. Like we're a startup. We, a little over a year old. And yeah.
It brings me to a question. So you're obviously in the business now of utilizing AI as a tool in your product development, but also, are there any AI tools for you, just to kick it off, that are just absolutely critical for you day to day? I mean, the ones that
can't
you
live
use.
without it.
I use OpenAI regularly,
Okay.
and I'll switch between different models for different types of tasks, and it's we also use that as we have API calls to OpenAI. I think that it's an incredible tool. It's like I don't think it's anything groundbreaking into like everybody already knows about it, and but I think that's one of the interesting things that's happening within this industry is that intelligence, in a lot of ways, as we've seen in the news recently, is kind of becoming a commodity, right? And that's a weird world to get into, where you can use different tools for different things, and some of them are better at specific things. And my co-founder swears by Cursor. I think it's a great tool for engineering and coding. But as these models get better and better, it's how do you like specialize them for specific types of activities? And for in this case, what we're focused on is connecting to instrumentation, connecting to data sets and tools, like tools for pulling in the right data, and then also connecting to tools for doing the science, like from an execution perspective. And so I think that we're all kind of facing this new future of what does work look like? What's the role of AI? What is our role in this? And I think it's something to be optimistic about.
Yeah, and I am super optimistic about it, and I think a lot of I'm try not to speak for our audience, but I think, there's different levels of encounters that everybody's had with AI. At least that's been my experience when I have this conversation with folks that I know. It's like, anywhere from, oh yeah, I've heard great things about that in proteins, for example, and using it for massive data set, manipulation and interpretation, trying to get results from that data set in a more intelligent fashion. Image data as well, trying to detect cancerous lesions, if you will, in imaging, where, a human wouldn't detect it until here, but now that we have all this data and basically you can create an algorithm that'll just look at it deeper than any other, any human could do it. That's a huge impact. And I think it's great way to kick off our first segment here, where I think coming at it from an angle of protocol development, right, which is yet another level. And I think that's an area where there's, again, I can't speak for the audience, but I mean, the awareness, I have to imagine, is a bit less, because it's not that sort of magic thing. It's sort of our day to day, right? And that's really the most important. Some of these big data solutions are great, but they have their place. Now, how can I actually take this technology and use it to make my day to day work more effective, smoother, and accomplish? At the end of the day, having a job is all about deliverables, and if you can help people get to that point faster, boom, that's the way to do it. So I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how AI is changing that day to day for scientists and creating protocols, designing experiments, and of course reducing human error. I know it's a lot I've backed on there, but
I want to hear about designing experiments, because I know,
for sure,
as a scientist on the bench trying to really understand how to build the right framework to get to the answers that you need, the design of the experiment was the most complex, because you had to take in different parameters, make sure the variables were accounted for, and just create something orthogonally, right, that could get you to where you need to be for the data set. Can AI help with that?
Yeah, I think so. Some really great questions in there. There is a lot to unpack. I think that protocols are a really interesting kind of entry point. So ideas are cheap, right? Hypotheses are cheap until you test them in the real world. And you need to build the protocols, reliable protocols that have the right parameters, have the right, it takes some time to optimize them. And so it's complex, but it also connects to every single thing that you do in science. Whether that's I need to outsource this to a CRO, they have to put together a protocol for that. I want to run a computational workflow or pipeline, and I need to use a number of tools, and here are all the inputs and outputs and all the parameters you need to define for that. If I want to, do something just physically in the lab myself, obviously I need to do that. If I want to actually scale that up and run it on lab automation, you need to be able to write the code based off that in code-based protocols. And so that's really an area that we focused on early on with Potato, and where we see a lot of people using it. And so right now, I think, for all of us, we need to set expectations for where AI is currently and where it's going, right? We've seen drastic improvements in hallucinations and its ability to basically recall information recently. But we're also seeing that, the way I think about this from a protocols perspective is help me get to a first draft, something that I can work off of and that is literature based. And so we have really focused on curating a very specific data set around published protocols, whether it's open access literature. We have a partnership with Wiley that we've announced where we're working to pull in proprietary literature as well. Users can upload their own personal protocols or papers with methods sections, and then we use that to the user can go in. They can say I want to do Golden Gate assembly with this specific restriction enzyme. And it'll pull the relevant papers together. It identifies facts of information, like maybe it's this like T4 DNA ligase, and provide some context on that. It will basically put together the step-by-step instructions that then they can collaborate with other people in the lab to refine it, to optimize it. You can ask questions and say, like, where did you get this information from? And so that it pulls up like the information from the literature. And so that's kind of like a first start. And then you use that to optimize, right? And so we've built some tools for optimization. That's like something that is kind of coming up in the future, as well as some additional tools. But I really think that like protocols are kind of the lifeblood of science. It's the instructions, so the step-by-step recipes, and so that, in terms of like people that use it, we have free platform that you can go on and just try some of the basic tools, and there's some literature review tools to come up with like hypothesis generation with like to put together the protocols, we find that people will go on, and there's this one of the interesting features that we built is like, scientists are skeptical, right? Like you want to be able to figure out like where's the information coming from. So we did this like show work button, and you can go and see what behind the scenes what it's doing.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, and so
like I want to see what you're doing because I want to buy into it,
Yeah, and so like it gets interesting because like it says, okay, here's like the literature that it pulls from. It'll like pull out citations that it's using to generate the protocols, and then it does this like interesting like question answer where it'll come up with like common questions for this given protocol, and then it answers them itself. And people go in there, and I remember when we first released that, people went in there like, oh my gosh, like that reagent, just finding that reagent took me 9 months.
Wow.
In graduate school. And so, it's those little things that speed up science, and it's making it more reproducible, that I think is it's got to be one of the biggest areas of focus when we're building AI tools for science.
So the question and answer, is that so that you can have something to answer when your boss asks you about how you came up with this protocol?
Yeah, that's a you could use it for that, yes.
Just a disclaimer for everyone.
Yeah.
Digital feature, your boss answer button.
Yeah, it's the boss promise.
I love that, though. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
That's great. Good.
I had a question, Nick. And this sort of goes to, thank goodness we have sort of an AI guy on because it's come up multiple times. If you've listened to the podcast, which you have. And now we have an AI series. Finally. Thank you, Sura. Thank you, Nick. As we talk about the closed loop, Will talked about this in a previous podcast as well, that they're doing over at Ginkgo. I want to play the other side of the coin. Yes, there's a hype right now related to AI. We all know it. We all see it. We play with it. But I want to play the side of the coin of, where do we go too far, and what is being put in place as far as standards? Think about the early ages of the internet. It was kind of Wild West, but then they all kind of got together and said, hold on a minute, we've got to put some structure around this that makes sense, that doesn't stifle the innovation. So I want to get your take on, are there organizations coming together? Because you're mentioned about the Wiley Publishing. Your title was How to Use AI and Not Let It Use Us. I'm kind of paraphrasing there. But I kind of want to get your thoughts on, we really need to come together and talk about these things because there's a lot of sharing, Wild West stuff. But when do we go to the point that it's too far and it's like, how do we get back type of thing? So
the question is around like, how do we create safe tools? And
exactly.
I think this is a really important question. I'm like very encouraged that like government organizations are focused on this. So like that I think it's important for each of us internally to be able to like build tools. So one of the things that we had to do originally, like early on, was say like we had to be able to say, detect, are there instances where people are trying to use this for like nefarious intent? And so we've done that, and we built some automated solutions for us to be able to kind of monitor that. But like this is a much broader conversation than any one individual company, and it's something that is happening, I think, at a national level. You've got organizations that are interested in this, like NIST. I've had some conversations with them. DARPA is very much interested in how do we in autonomous science, and how do we protect against those types of bioweapons, for example. And so I think that there are a lot of people really focused on that, and it's obviously it's like a balance that you're always playing to be able to kind of push for the technology, but do it in a way that is safe.
Yeah, I think some of those. Sometimes you don't necessarily. Yeah, it's great to have government interaction, but sometimes you run the risk of, government sees it as, this is a tool for us to use against this alphabet agency or with this alphabet agency. And it's kind of like, I don't know. What was that, Real Genius? The movie Real Genius, where the government took his idea away, and yeah.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
never seen that movie.
Oh, Real Genius with was it Val Kilmer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. Yeah.
And Laszlo Holyfield.
Laszlo. Oh, my gosh. Laszlo the legend, right?
Yeah.
This sounds like a deep cut.
Well, I mean, you ever see Weird Science?
Oh, yeah.
It was
It's
the
mainstream.
same era, kind of,
Okay.
and it was, this sort of overwhelming, like, here's this research project and it's being used for, a Defense Department weapons program and things like that. It was like a laser that could blast a hole through anything, I think, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And anyway, the whole story of, I'm not even going to even talk about it more because I don't want to give too much away, but it was, Val Kilmer.
Don't spoil it for me. I haven't.
In a role.
Too much away. I can't wait to watch this movie.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be interesting though if there was a movie like that built around, like AI? Maybe there already has, and I haven't heard of it yet. It's like I think I'm not keeping up with movies like I used to, but certainly that would be, I think, relevant at this point to come up with something around that.
Sounds like a good second career.
Yeah, right.
We should do that next intermission. Watch movies live.
There we
Watch
go.
movies live. Yeah, we've talked about
Mystery Science Theater 3000 or whatever. Where
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we could
yeah,
project it.
absolutely.
And just have I love that.
Will be 4 shadows instead of 2 or
Two.
3. No, 3.
I thought it was
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
3 shadows. That what a genius! Absolute genius. Yeah.
It is a great show.
But yeah, a great question, Jeff. I think that is certainly on everybody's mind, and there's so many different applications in play here. I think for a lot of us, and you think about, okay, well, for data manipulation used in life science, I mean, this is a great application, right? But if you start using this to target for, let's say, insurance or something like that, eligibility or coverage and things like that. I mean, these are all things that, you might not think about offhand, but I mean, it really needs to be supported at a government level to some degree, so that companies aren't just pulling the rug out from under folks, using this tool. They might use the tool anyway. It's just whether they can use it actually to execute on their plan. And so many topics I'm sure on the horizon for us to digest. But I think the angle that you're coming at it from is just so practical in terms of building experiments, and not that aha moment of not having to spend 9 months doing something. That just all of a sudden compressed the timeline of the experiment. That's not a lot to criticize, at this point. I mean, it'd be awesome if the technology gets so big that we do have to have like an agency, but I'm getting off topic a little bit from that standpoint.
But I mean, like, just to that point about the reagent, part of trying to figure out how you want to, explore the questions that are being asked is understanding if there are relevant, like, protocols and relevant reagents out there to meet that job, right? And that takes months to find something that A, works and can be reproducible and potentially amenable to miniaturization so that you can put it on a robotic platform. So anything that can reduce that time time, right? I remember working with some powder-filled reagent at one of the companies I worked at that just fell out of the solution, and we had to invent all these ways to get it back in solution when another reagent could have slipped in there.
Yeah. That's a good example. I mean, like that's the goal, is to like detect those things, to find kind of those anomalies. It's hard to do because, you know, sometimes these things are consensus based, and so like you have to feed it you have to make sure that it has the right data and the right information to be able to pull it and to detect it. But you know, that's a big part of what we focus on, is just like that curation of information, so that, you know, you can surface those types of I don't know, like anomalies that
Pain points.
pain points. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a robustness check for an experiment, right? You're just like doing you can kind of check all these different avenues that, you know, you just can't think about all at the same time, or you don't want to spend the time just doing that check. It can help you and say, well, the odds of this being successful on this robotic platform when it's executed are going to be here versus there, and that's a huge aha moment for
And like you
scientists.
said, it's impossible to read every single paper out there, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, you could have gotten to the answer, but how many papers deep do you have to be? Meanwhile, you know, the head of the biochemistry department is like, so have you screened these 80,000 variants yet? You know, and you're just like, no, I'm still doing a paper search.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, a lot of what we do is we also try and like enrich existing, like build documentation for existing tools, like code that people put together, right, and enrich that with scientific like information, so we can pull it from the literature and you know, like help identify parameters that you know, people might want to run, like alternative parameters. So there's a lot of really interesting problems here, like that tie into and connect to the lab automation, and I'm curious to, you know, hear whether now or maybe in a separate conversation in the future, where you guys think that there's opportunities to utilize AI to make lab automation more flexible.
Have you seen our segment series? That really just rolls right in.
I just rolls
we
right
begin,
into
Nick?
segment 2, AI and laboratory automation, the future of research.
Who's being interviewed now? I think
Nice.
it's us, guys.
How AI-driven lab automation is increasing
Professional podcaster.
efficiency. Yes, I mean, we'll leave it to our co-hosts. What do you think? You know, in terms of how could it impact the space we're directly in every day?
Well, I'll go ahead since I'm sometimes outspoken on this arena. I think one of the first things, if we're going to achieve closed loop stuff, there has to be standards. We've talked about this ad nauseum on the show multiple times. There has to be a bona fide standard. Now, I know that some organizations are trying to do so. And I think sometimes we only need to look to parallel industries that are not necessarily exactly directed or connected to us, but they have standards in place, and they have been for a very long time. They're fleshed out, the whole 9 yards. I think we should look outside of our space because we're not that special. I mean, the research is, yes, the science behind it, yes, that's unique. But how we do it isn't necessarily unique. You know, a robot will move from here to there. It's not going to be unique from a robot to a robot. The code will be different, yes, but Mike's been in the space for a very long time as well, so he knows a robot told to go here to go there will do exactly that. But you kind of have to put standards around this, so when you do that closed loop, you talked about it earlier, API to API. Create these APIs so there's just an easy communication. Here, talk.
Yeah.
That's it. I simplified it way too easy, but that's really kind of what I'm striving for, is a standardization that we can all adopt and be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, like, so organizations like Sila is kind of working on this. Are there like parallels in other industries that you're looking at that you think are interesting to make that comparison? Because we're obviously not there from
Sure.
life sciences perspective.
Another industry within the larger industry within the company I work for, Brooks Automation, most of our company is driven by semiconductor, and this is a space that has become, it's, you know, absolutely a requirement to have these standard protocols in place when you're connecting equipment, because you just don't, they've realized, you know what, We don't have the time to do the metrology and all the connections every single time we implement these pieces of equipment. We need that to be already built into the device. So like if you're going to, for example, a robot that's operating within a fab, all those robots support the same protocols, right? They might have some special nuanced things here and there, but I mean, that cannot be a barrier, right, as far as execution, because already making a semiconductor with 3 nanometer, 4 nanometer line width, standards is a hard enough problem. Same thing with automotive, right? Getting the body in white to be perfect on a new car that's only going to be manufactured for 6 years, that's a huge problem already by itself. So if they got to deal with all these manufacturing equipment issues, that just extends that. And then if you go back to the 70s and the 80s when robots first started going into car manufacturing, the lifetime of a car was much longer, 10 years in production. Mercedes had this thing, oh yeah, forever. We're going to do 10 years at a time, each model. It's like, who does a car for 10 years anymore? I mean, that thing gets retooled I think 6 years is pretty much the standard whenever they come out with a new model. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that standards became the means to just not having to deal with that. I think in lab automation, we still deal with a lot of, how do I connect this and that? And, even just devices. Steele is trying to take care of that on the device side, but boy, the data side of things, there's so many opportunities there. And I'm coming from a robotics standpoint, from the outside. I just looking inside, I'm like, wow, data is one of those where there's so many things to be done. But then again, we're talking about a much broader range of data than you have in a lot of other industries. So I get it, right? It's tougher to solve that, but
yeah, there's a lot of disparate tools. Like it's a big challenge, but I think I 100% agree with you that this it's a massive, massively important problem.
Yeah. You do. So Elizabeth, you see this all the time with disparate devices having to come together in one machine, one robot, 20 devices, 5 of them talk great, 10 of them okay, and then 5 of them don't even have an interface or one that's vetted out or something like that. I mean, that's an extreme case. Usually there's some sort of driver, but still the APIs are all over the place. How do you talk to this device versus that device? Is like some were developed like at the beginning of the instrument's development. Other ones were developed like after the thing had been on the market for a while. They all come at it from very different places. But in the automation community, they expect everything to work together all as one, solution. And so I'm sure you see that more
Yeah, it's
more
challenging.
often.
Yeah, even one device can have different APIs depending on the application they're used for. So it's very challenging because we are always working to get it validated and operational for the user. And then another customer will have a different application, so we have to change everything. So it's not an easy task.
That brings up a question, actually, Nick. Is it everything in the cloud for you? Are you doing everything out of the cloud? Okay.
Everything's on the cloud, yeah. Right now, we build it out so that it's like from an infrastructure perspective, so that it can be deployed on-prem.
Okay.
We don't have any on-prem deployments as of yet.
Okay. Yeah, that's always been a topic since I started in this industry about, outside communication, can we have that? And it seems like large organizations are coming around. They're finding ways to standardize that and have a way. Are you finding that as well? They're kind of more open to it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, I think there is still a need for on-prem deployments, and like we're very diligent to be thinking about that early on because we're still in this kind of hybrid world from my perspective.
But it's not that like companies are coming around necessarily. Some companies, like for example, Resilience, self-hosted everything in order to kind of keep the secret sauce secret, right? But they were still utilizing, Git and cloud infrastructure for things.
Yep. Yeah. It's there's some interesting approaches that people are taking. So yeah, I think I don't know. I don't have any real interesting insights from that perspective, to be honest with you.
Is there a dream, like that you have, or a vision that you have in terms of like, where could this go? Because I was just thinking about this lab automation topic is, really you could go from experiment design direct to an automation, execution of automation. Do you see kind of that? Is that a vision for you to kind of connect all that together to where you're actually getting down to the robot and be able to bring that in?
That's exactly right. So one of the big things that we think about, so we've built a bunch of tools right now that are, people use for hypothesis generation, like literature review, for example. And then there's some tools for protocol planning. We've started to translate those protocols into code for actually running like computational workflows or lab automation as well. But really, the longer term vision here is end-to-end orchestration and so an agentic perspective. And so, I think an interesting future, I think, for the sciences, life sciences in particular, is like I have a specific research project in mind. I want to go after targets for ALS, for example. Okay. I might want some expertise in neuroimmunology. I might want some expertise in like single cell proteomics, for example. If there are AI agents that have access to specific databases and biased by specific information, and then they have access to tools to actually execute the experiments. You kind of think about these as AI collaborators. The neuroimmunology AI is collaborating with the proteomics expert. The human is kind of managing this process and massively increasing the amount of work that we can do, because I personally think that there's more science to do in the world than any human could possibly ever do. And so I think of these as AI collaborators that, if we can really make like discoveries happen faster and and do that in a way that is like increasing the fidelity, increasing the quality, because we can, use these automated systems, that's the way I see the world. And I think, what's the timeline to get there? I don't know exactly. But what I can tell is that, like I mentioned before, the cost of intelligence is going to zero. And that as we build these tools, they'll become better and better. And so, artificial general intelligence is coming at some point. Whether that's, a year away, as some people say, that might be 5 years away. I don't know what it looks like, to be honest with you. But if we can use on top of that, if we can direct these systems to be able to do things that are beneficial for society, like making fundamental discoveries, that's a future in which I'm bought in on.
Right on.
While making sure that it doesn't do the nefarious things and that it's not like inaccurate and because it reminds me of the classic problem of like, I was a consultant for a while as a BCG, and a company is like trying to they have a revenue problem, and they're like, we'll just put more work at this thing. We'll try and sell more of this thing. But what they realize later on is that it's a profitability problem, and then the more they sell of it, they're just like losing money, right? Yeah. That's the same idea with science. If you're doing crappy science, if you're doing more crappy science, then like or like harmful science, then I think that it's really important that we steer these things in the right direction.
And do you have those safeguards in Potato AI, for example, to prevent people from doing lousy science, or when you're looking at putting things on automated platforms, certain buffers and certain concentrations become caustic, and you don't want that to be something that people work with on a daily basis. Are there things that you've built in, or is it just how people pose the question to Potato AI?
We've built some tools in to be able to detect like harmful intent, like chemicals, like it's not perfect. I will say. That's something
Like,
that
hey,
we,
you're using hydrofluoric acid. Maybe don't use that.
yeah, exactly. And so it'll actually
You laughed, Jeff, but somebody at my last lab did that, and I was like, could you please not tell someone
Hydrofluoric
that?
acid? What?
Really? Wow.
yeah, it basically shuts it
Tell
down.
me for
Yeah,
that.
I got
Yeah,
you.
so we do that. We have some safety checks in there that will shut down, so like it's not actually going to do it. Obviously, like the major AI providers build these things in as well, and so there's a bunch of safeguards against these things. It's something that we need to continue to double down on for sure.
But you can get around those open AI things, right? Instead of asking the question, you can ask like, if I wanted to avoid being a master, villain, how like you can kind of reword the question to get the answer.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
Not that I ask these questions.
No, surely not. No.
I want to see your prompt history. What are
I
you talking
know.
about?
No kidding.
I like messing with AI.
That's an episode right there. Prompt history.
You thought browser
Your cache.
history was bad.
Yeah, prompt history.
Yeah, delete
that's
cache, right? Oh, this looks like a great list. Oh, yeah, it's only 2 days old. Oh, okay, got it. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
Well,
seriously, though, I think that writing that in is an important part of deploying software
Yeah.
of any kind out into the realm.
for sure.
yeah,
Sure.
and thank you for your kind of that detail on your vision of, as you said, closing the loop and what are the different things you have to pass through to kind of get to that point. And for those of us in the automation sector and the physical world of experiment execution, that standards thing becomes even more important. Not only the data coming out, but just getting it to the automation and how to connect a protocol and say, hey, we've got a protocol here, because that's an area where there's a lot of lines in the sand drawn, often at a vendor level, right? It's like, well, if you want to talk to this instrument, you've got to have this language. And if you want to, it only accepts protocols that are stored in binary, nothing in a, a script. Yeah, it's just things like that where you have to deal with sort of translation. And, but again, maybe that's an area AI can also help us with, is making that more fluid, just the translation part.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's a huge opportunity for that, and that's something that we've been kind of like looking into, like being able to pull in standards that exist that are out there, like SILA, for example, and kind of piggyback off of that. But I think you can also start to be able to generate. So we've built some tools for building documentation around APIs, for example. And so I can basically upload some code, and it will help explain it. What's the scientific intent of this? What is like? What are the functions? What are the parameters? What are alternative parameters that you might do? And like, what's the scientific reasoning and rationale for that? And so, I think being able to combine some of those things to make it easier to connect to different types of systems, and then utilizing existing standards, helping to build additional standards. Those are all things that we're interested in. We are a small company, and so we obviously, as we're kind of building out tools, these are big areas of exploration for us.
Sure. Yeah, it's a lot of work behind it, I'm sure, but. As things pick up momentum, you often see in the industry, you get support from other partners to kind of give you that momentum. Often customers, right? Do you find that customers often can drive, development faster than a lot of vendors, right? Because they're coming at it from the user perspective, like, yeah, we want Nick's tool to work better, right? And so to go to the other vendors and start supporting, driving in a direction that works better for your developments. I want to switch gears a little bit, because I don't want to miss this one. Is what would be the biggest like expectation versus reality, aka myth, that you find yourself encountering in using AI in science?
Expectation versus reality. I think
where you're having to kind of tamp it. Say, well, it's not, doesn't work quite like that, but. Here's
like the hype in, you bring in potato AI and it does all these awesome design experiments, and you run it the first chance and you get everything that you get, versus like the actual reality, right?
Yeah. So I think an interesting question around this is really around like how much can you get out? What can you generate and discover that's like maybe out of distribution? Like coming up with new ideas, creative ideas, for example. AI is not typically great at that, and so I think that there are some interesting organizations that are doing cool things around this, like Future House. You guys have probably heard, or maybe have heard of them, and we I really respect what they're doing in that space. I think one of the challenges, like, so we built some features on Potato where you can upload a certain subset of literature, and you can go in and ask it questions, and it will give you kind of the summary of the consensus is across them. It'll pull out information from individual papers and like give the reasoning behind it. It'll generate these reports like you would see with like deep research tools that we see coming out of a lot of the frontier AI models. But then we start to take like more of an agentic approach where it's like look at it from a neuroscience perspective, look at them from a pharmacology angle, like molecular biology, and summarize again, but then use that to generate, come up with new ideas. And so like I think that I think that it's going to take some time for us to get to tools that come up with really good like hypotheses. But I also think that the truth is any hypothesis is a hallucination. It's a scientific hallucination that we're looking to invalidate, right?
I heard Matrix music. This is a hallucination.
There you go. There we go. So, you know, like how well can these systems come up with new ideas? I think we're fairly limited in that as the model architectures get better, and you know, I think that will continue to improve. And then, you know, the other thing is like how autonomous can we be? Can science be currently like with agentic systems? I think we're still in the early phases of some of these agentic models, but it's rapidly getting better, and so it's a really exciting time to see how much these things improve over the next couple of years. Because I personally think that at the rate of current change, that we are going to have like kind of mind-blowing capabilities coming up near in the future, and a lot of the things that are hype right now, like they're getting better very quickly. Like hallucinations are reducing drastically. So, yeah, I think that, you know, as any of us as scientists, we have to be super skeptical of these things.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're improving rapidly.
So you're saying the hype is hype now, but because the tools are getting better, it's actually going to become reality shortly.
I think so.
Well, that
Awesome.
would certainly change the SLAS floor from a show perspective. And it's kind of like, yeah, there's 5 or 6 vendors doing agentic labs, and they're all on the customer side. I mean, I've heard some inklings of customers who are taking this initiative on their own.
Yeah.
Coming from the top, working its way down, and they're all in. So
Well, yeah, that's 100%. Like we're seeing it with pharma companies, like a proactive outreach. They're all, you know, in some ways it's a question of build versus buy. Like, are they going to build it internally? Like, I think we all see what this is kind of a future that's coming, and we're fortunate like to be a part of it and to be early movers in this space. So, you know, it is going to be interesting though, because like I went to SLAS this year, and you know, when you start to mix robotics with agentic models, and you think about like, you know, it's not only just like running the experiments, but it's doing the data analysis and feeding that into the next iteration, and like doing, you know, like an enzyme optimization or like enzyme like thermostabilization, for example, like doing the tweaks, actually running the experiments. That's the future I think we'll move in within the next few years.
I have to imagine any pharma company that, you know, their business depends on pipeline and pipeline outputting product. If they're not doing a robustness check on a quarterly basis at a very high level, they got to start now to look at what's the robustness of our business and what tools do we need? And I'm sure, yeah, AI is like, that's why they're taking it on themselves. They're like, well, what's being done right now? Well, there's a little bit here and a little bit there, and they hear that. They're like, what can we do? What can we do to address that? And perfect opportunity for partnering. But when they're looking at it themselves, I think to me, that's a more positive, better outlook for the vision of how AI is going to be used in the industry than if it's sort of like, well, here's a solution. And they're like, we're not sure if we have that problem yet. They're going, no, we have that problem. Come on, what solutions are out there? I think that's got to happen at this point for those.
It's easier to
companies.
help them if they're already down that road.
Yeah, right. You're not having to sell them on anything. They're like, no, we've already gone through the basic stuff. Now give us, what's the separation? What differentiates?
I remember I was at a meeting in like 5 years ago in Boston, and one of the scientists came up. He was giving a talk, and his main point was technology has evolved so much, and the data is being generated in such a quantity that they don't have the means of analyzing everything. And they're like, now we're worried because we're generating so much data and we cannot handle that. So now with AI, I feel like that is going to solve so much of that problem, because technology has evolved so much and we have so many tools, and with automation, even make it faster and increase the amount of data. And that's where, companies are going there. And with tools like AI, it can simplify the life of so many scientists that are, designing these experiments. So that's the beginning of it. But then when you go down the road, how I'm going to use all that data to my favor instead of being overwhelmingly there. I see it so much that can potentially change the life, and also the speed of getting these results out there and having new treatments and solutions for life. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, more data faster, right? 100%. That's and I think like with a combination of these intelligent systems like AI systems and robotics, like to me, the way I've always thought, like from the very beginning, about what we're building is kind of like a central nervous system for the lab, and maybe I shouldn't talk about this on the podcast because like I've not put this into any messaging or anything like that, but here I am. I'm a neuroscientist, and
Disclaimer.
Yeah.
Better talk to marketing first.
Maybe I should talk to marketing.
No,
marketing
say
department. Yeah. So like I think of it about it as like a central nervous system. Like you pull in the sensory information in terms of like and be able to do like the processing, the analysis of data analysis, like actuation with robotics and really it's like the orchestration and again, like this is just like the weird neuroscience nerd coming out of me. I think about things from a very systems perspective, and I think that that's the killer combination of it's intelligence plus actuation, sensation, like and that so it's robotics and AI. So
that's awesome. No, yeah.
I did have a question around that, as Mike had mentioned the word partnerships, but going from like you guys to a pharma company or whatever, do you see any potential partnerships between like you guys and integrator software developing companies who are in that space already 100%. For the robotics side?
100%. Yeah. So so there's two big areas for us in terms of what partnerships look like. One is on the data side. And so publishers make sense, right? You want to be able to pull in information like proprietary lab information, like electronic lab notebooks and LIMS systems. On the other side, it's the execution. And so it's companies that have or are building automation systems, like system integrators, like you're talking about. It's companies that have computational tools that we can orchestrate the use of those as well. And so the reason why I was at SLAS is because we were co-presenting with Ginkgo, and they have these, you guys talked to Will. They have those, modular rack systems. I think are just it's very exciting, and so that's an example of the types of systems that we are starting to work with, and we're kind of actively looking to build out those partnerships. So if anybody's listening and you want to talk, like, my email is nick@ReadySetPotato.com.
I didn't even
Shameless
have to
plugs
prompt
come
it.
later
That's
in the
good.
segment.
There it is. Nice segue, Nick. Good job.
Repetition's important, and multiple plugs welcome. Yeah, no, we want people to get in touch with you and reach out, and from hearing you on the podcast. So, but that's I like how you put that in terms of it's combining the movement with the brain power, if you will, and figuring out how to create a network together. And that, I think, Will's systems. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Will's systems are very illustrative of that in a lot of ways, right? Because they're modular, compartmentalized, right? You can have a single work cell that does a certain thing, specializes in a certain area. You have your imaging, you have your fluidics, you have your sealing, you have anything from very basic things to more complex. That's one question that came up on his episode, was like, how do you deal with the scale? And they have sort of different configurations that they've come up with over the years just to deal with those different requirements. But it's not going to be as elegant as, let's say, the human body, right? Where it's just this great execution of minimal, the weight ratio, power to weight ratio is all optimized, right? We still have to deal with the mechanics of actually executing something autonomously with the tools we have. But I think, bringing that closer, aligning with that mindset that you kind of talked us through around deploying this, where you can have different things that specialize in different areas, but they need to be connected ultimately, and have a process, an intelligent process in between them, whether it's the data or the execution of the experiment that's integrated. So,
yeah, I mean, I kind of think about it as I think about like, actually, this is something you guys asked about, plugs. There's I'll hold off on this, but I'll tease the idea. I think that there's, one of the things that allowed us to flourish as humanity was collective intelligence. It's like individual minds that have different perspectives and that are competing with each other within a civilization, and they're kind of nodes within a network, right? And it's almost like a meta scale version of like what the synaptic connectivity in the brain is, right? And if we can extend that to additional tools, like with tool use, as we have been, for thousands, if not I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, millions of years. I think it's probably not hundreds of thousands of millions. I don't know, to be honest.
It's okay. We'll skip the evolution of mankind.
Thousands.
Yeah, but like, extend that to external tools that have the capability to do senses that we don't have, and I don't know. It's I think that the more intelligences that we can create in the world that are they're capable of having unique perspectives and can contribute in different ways, like it's looking for a very interesting future that I'm excited for.
Yeah.
I just keep saying the same thing over and over.
But you're excited, so that's good.
So,
So we talked a little bit about where AI is heading kind of in, the world. In scientific research and automation as you see it, right? Where do you think that it's heading in terms of how it's evolving? We touched a little bit about how, your collaboration or your potential partnership with Ginkgo and what they're using, for their rack systems. But in your perspective, where's that heading to enable scientific research and automation to be better?
Yeah, so I would say for the way that where I think it's going to be improved is like more flexibility, and because right now it's fairly prohibitive, because on one end you've got like the scientist that might put together a protocol over a couple of months or optimize it. On the other hand, they hand it off to an automation engineer that takes time to translate the protocol and build that out. I think that it's a challenging process. There's a lot of information handoff, and and then so I think as these models get better at being able to orchestrate and being able to standardize and pull in APIs from different like tools and systems, it will be more flexible, and you'll be able to use that for like earlier stage types of applications. That's what I'm hoping for, and that's a future I think is exciting. Is like it's not just like scale up to like development. We can actually start to use these things for real research applications.
So basically a seamless transition from the scientist through automation to get the end results of data, which is sort of the best of both worlds, right? Where you can kind of take the knowledge base, have little to no code to get to the automated platform to get to your data. That's sort of what you're describing, right?
Yep, that's right. That's right. And so that's why, we're interested in these like collaborations and opportunities with like system integrators, is because, we think that kind of bringing these tools to make that more flexible is, it's kind of it's a unique moment in time.
Because there's a lot of time spent, right, on the scientist side to find the right protocol, and then that handoff. We need to understand how the scientist is doing it, because sometimes it doesn't translate that they're actually, flipping the tube numerous times when you're trying to automate it, and you have to account for those discrepancies between the man handling and the robot handling, to programming and testing to benchmarking. So to get from this end to that end with little to no kind of code and elaborate that into something that is worthwhile data, that seems like a good step, but also a big buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the big areas that we're kind of focused on, like in the here and now.
So as we roll up to our picks of the week and call to action and plugs, I want to ask one kind of a big picture question as far as what takeaway do you want listeners to have from this discussion? What's your key takeaway?
That's a great question.
Potatoes are better than apples.
Well, you took it, so that was my answer.
Sorry.
Sorry. No, I think in terms of the big takeaway, I think is like there's a reason to be optimistic for the future. Like I think there's a big reason. There's a lot of the world is kind of crazy right now. We all know that, and I think that there are things that we need to guard against. But I think we're also really at this exciting moment where, things are possible that have never been possible at any point in the history of humanity. And I don't want to hype. I'm not trying to hype, because I realize that there's like risk for all of these things, and that it's a lot of hard work to get there. But if you just look at the rate of change that's happening right now, the future is going to look different. It's going to be exciting. We all have to figure out how to adapt to it together. And I think that's part of what we need to do as scientific community, is band together, figure these things out, and like and kind of build a community to shape these things in the direction that we want it to go and that it needs to go. And so I'm glad that we can have these conversations around like building standards and around safety, because like we are building the future right now together. So I would say that's a big takeaway.
Well, I love it, and I got to tell you, I feel like this has been one album full of only deep tracks, and really appreciate the passion you have for the the business you've started and the technology. So I'm actually looking forward to re-listening to the episode myself, just to kind of go back through a lot of these really, I think, important areas that you've talked about in AI and how it can be applied in science. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so now we have our segment. We'll do plugs at the end, but we have a pick of the week. I think you had a heads up
teased it, but I didn't tell him exactly what it was.
So, picks of the week can be a range of things. You can have multiples, as Mustafa, I think, set the record for
Oh.
the sheer number of picks of the week we can have in one episode. It was fine.
The description was beautiful, filled with.
Yes, it was great. It was great, and so we always, if we can also go around if you want to think about it, or if you have one right away.
I have a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
All right.
These are just like things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the Dwarkesh podcast,
Okay.
I think is a really interesting one. He interviews people kind of like leaders at the intersection of AI, and the most recent one is by Joseph Henrich. And I'm looking at my phone right now. It's like why humans survived and smarter species didn't.
Ooh.
And I think it's a really interesting model for the world and like collective intelligence. I think that idea is really interesting, and so I really like that podcast episode. A show that I've been watching recently is pretty dark, but like really makes you think. Like how do we build the right things for the future? It's called Pantheon on Netflix, and it's about the concept of uploaded intelligence. Like, and as a neuroscientist and somebody working in AI, it's something I can really geek out about. It's pretty serious, and so like take it, with a very philosophical mindset, and don't let it. But
it's not a beer drinking show.
It's not a beer drinking show.
Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
That's right.
Cool.
So those are a couple. I'm reading a book that I have been really enjoying, is Team of Rivals, about Abraham Lincoln and building out a cabinet of like rivals, and I think it's really just like, I don't know, it's an interesting way to view the world of like because I think about a lot of times, as I think about these kind of agent-based approaches, and you have like different perspectives kind of competing with each other. I don't know. I'm inspired by the way that Abraham Lincoln built out a cabinet of like former competitors, and so like I like kind of the ecosystem building. I don't know. Those are the types of things I'm nerding out on right now. Very serious.
Very cool.
And
Jeff, Mike?
Yeah, I have two, but Jeff,
Go ahead, Mike. Wait a minute. I bet one of them's an Apple product.
No, none of them are Apple products.
Oh my goodness.
We love Mike's Apple products.
So well, one of them is just
Oh, here we go. Yep.
I heard him grunting.
So it's a.
We
You're gonna
can't
have to
see it
kill
because
your
we have
background.
it in the background.
It's basically one of these balls to sit on as a alternative. I usually use its standing desk, and that's what I'm doing right now. But I got this thing, and I have to say, it's like it's an exercise all by itself to sit on this thing.
We expect him to have a 6-pack by the end of the
He's going to be ripped.
I don't even think I need to give out the model or the brand, because there's so many of these things available.
We'll link it in the description.
Pick one that's probably more. Yeah. Pick one that's probably more than $25, because I feel like, if you're going to sit on something that's 3 feet off the ground, you probably want it to be, durable.
But it's cool because he showed us a picture. It's got like a stand for the ball, right?
It keeps
and
it
back
in
in the day
place,
where these things were all the rage.
Oh,
and
you'd
people
see
were
them in the
switching
corner.
out for chairs in their companies. I just had a ball and I fell off that thing all the time. So thank God for the stand.
If you fall off on this thing, you clearly are trying to, I think, at that point.
That sounds like something my kids would love. They'd be bouncing all over the place.
Yep.
Its instructions were 3 lines, but the warnings were 3 pages. So you can tell the lawyers got a hold of that one.
What were the instructions? Open package, drop ball in the stand.
And actually, I bought the Bosu ball too. I don't have that one here, but the Bosu ball is just a partial ball, and then it's got a flat surface on the top. And the idea of that is you stand and balance on it. And that one also, the instructions were actually printed on the outside of the box. Fill it to this height, and it has the height, illustrated on the box. But inside is this long piece of paper stapled,
Staples, wow.
Exactly.
I use the Bosu ball to do push-ups.
Yeah, it's good for core.
I'll call you to task.
My second pick of the week is actually it's inspired by, you were mentioning, kind of groupthink, crowdthink, right? The intelligence coming from a group. It's a book that I was turned on to years ago by a friend of mine. It's an older, well, it's 2004 published date. It's called The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki. Why the many are smarter than the few and how collective wisdom shapes business, economies, societies, and nations. James Surowiecki, I recommend this one actually as an audiobook because Grover Gardner is the reader, and he has just this great voice. You know, he's just like, it's just
there it is.
oh yeah. But I read the book first, and then I found out there was an audiobook, and I heard the sample. I'm like, I know it's redundant, but I'll buy the audiobook because it's really good storytelling. They talk about some of the examples of where things went great and also things went sideways. You know, one example is the bowling industry. You know, back in the early part of the 20th century, there was a bowling boom and there were bowling alleys on every corner, and that was one of the first bubbles in the market history. Right? Was no, people were not going to bowl 3 times a week times this many people and all this stuff, except places like Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, and you know, things like that. But he goes through that whole story of how AMF, the American Machine and Foundry, went from the biggest stock in the market to nobody,
Yeah.
you know, in a matter of years. And you saw all these bowling alleys just that turned into wastelands. So
Sounds like a great read. I love
Yeah, I like that.
there's some fun stories there. Yeah, and also using markets. You know, just using essentially fabricated markets where people can invest funny money, right? And using those to kind of calculate things. It's again, they're experiments in groupthink, if you will, to see if the group is actually going in the successful direction or not. But in so many cases, it does. And so yeah, James Surowiecki, The Wisdom of Crowds.
But there are robotics in bowling, you know that, right?
Oh yeah, that was one of my. Actually, I think it was an inspiration. The first time I went bowling as a kid, I remember seeing the works in the back, the automated pin setter.
Yep.
I was like,
And then
wow.
The lane polisher or the lane refurnisher or whatever. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
got to combine the two so you can like start to cultivate the microbial populations on the bowling balls you get from the bowling alleys, and then do the lab robotics on it, because that might be interesting too.
I don't want to know.
No one wants to know that. No.
Permanently preserved in the oil on the lane.
Yeah. There you go.
Trust Nick to bring that up.
We found prehistoric bacteria at a bowling alley. Living.
Oh.
What you got, Jeff?
Okay, well, this is right up Nick's alley, honestly. I got a book called Software as a Science. And this follows, well, it's called Unlocking Limitless Recurring Revenue Without Losing Control. So
Limitless.
I was like, all right. Obviously, these guys have, Dan Martell is the first writer, but he's had 3 other guys write it with him. They run the SaaS Academy, and they've exited 3 or 4 software companies at this point, but they run this academy for guys like you, Nick, who are, hey, how do I keep my MRR going? How can I reduce churn? Get my average revenue per account higher, those types of things. And their model for revenue, when you look at the traditional funnel, it's high at the top and it just goes to a point. Well, you're done at that point. But in the software as a service model, you get the first triangle, but then you have more value per customer with a triangle that's absolutely correct, because you're expanding at the bottom and they're buying more services from you, therefore making that customer more valuable. And they're covering marketing at the beginning. So I'm only like 70 pages in, but it's pretty valuable, I think, from my mindset of, okay, how would you take an on-prem environment to a hybrid environment? And what do you need to be cognizant of? Because I'm always thinking about what's the next value add and making the customer more valuable to us. So that's what I'm into, nerd stuff.
I like that. Super nerdy.
Elizabeth? Sura? Anyone?
I got nothing this
Anybody?
week.
Yeah, no, there
I
it
don't
is.
think I have anything for the pick of the week. Actually, I'm very excited about this weekend because the Formula One season is starting. So I'm going to be watching that.
Hey,
Are
don't
you
forget
gonna
this.
go? You can watch that Brad Pitt movie. There's a
No,
the
it's
new-
in
Oh,
it's not coming out yet. I think it's June. I don't know if I want to watch it
yeah.
though.
Okay. Yeah.
But but yes, I've been watching the trailers and everything. It's just they were filming that last season as well, so that was interesting.
A lot of
Nice.
Formula One related movies in the last 10 years. Senna,
Yeah.
the one about Niki Lauda as well.
Didn't they have a series on Netflix or something?
Yes, the Drive to Survive.
There it is. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Sebring 12-hour race is happening this weekend as well.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Well, just why they're like they go around the world as rock stars, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, very cool. Well, now is plug time, Nick. So it's definitely time to plug
Where listeners can follow Nick and Potato
follow.
AI.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is my favorite part. So yeah, our website is ReadySetPotato.com. If anybody wants to, reach out, my email is nick@ReadySetPotato.com. And let's see, I have a podcast that if anybody's interested in checking it out, it's called Once a Scientist. I started it back in 2020. I've had about 90 episodes, and we explore like what are like career options within the sciences, and like what's the future of science look like. So that's been fun. And I really appreciate you guys having me on the podcast and this opportunity to share what we're doing, and excited to continue to listen to the future episodes, because you guys are really kind of cultivating a good kind of cohort of guests. So I'm honored to be on.
Well, it's an absolute honor to have you on, and a pleasure to talk with you over the last hour plus, and looking forward to talking more and seeing what happens, as your business continues to grow and new things are happening. So, and also meeting possibly next week if you're going to be at the
LRIG
there.
Yeah,
There's
that's right.
there's that too. So I look forward to that. And again, thank you for coming on
And launching the AI Thought Leader
launching
series.
the AI Founder Series. That's right, first episode, and we'll continue. And that's really motivational for us to hear what you said. I mean, we enjoy doing this. It's a passion of ours. I'm sure now that you're so many episodes deep in your podcast as well, it comes from a place of passion and loving what you do. So. With that, we will wrap up this episode of the Helical Brew. www.helicalbrew.com. As always, that's the best way to reach us. And then we've got a breakout link there for folks that want to hop over to the different platforms. Actually, before we go, that brings me to a question. What do you use as your distribution platform for your podcast? I'm just curious, now that we're talking podcast inner workings.
So I host. You mean where do I host it, or like?
Where do you upload your for distribution on like RSS feeds?
Buzzsprout.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I use Riverside for recording.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just basically lock in. I'm locked in because I'm unwilling to learn new tools because I don't have the time to do enough production.
Yeah, I mean, it was a similar thing for us. So I originally, when I created these accounts, it was like, hey, we're going to do a podcast. Look up the word podcast, and that came up with Spotify for Creators. And they will do a video podcast on their platform, but they'll only give you an audio RSS feed if you want to distribute on other platforms. So it's basically, I got Spotify with video or iTunes without video, which is fine. I think most people are, if they want to listen to it in the car, they're going to do that with the podcast platform. But then YouTube, that was Sura's initiative, was on the YouTube side of things. It's like, this is where it's at. And so our website actually directs to a YouTube channel.
I'm glad everybody could see my helicopter pilot headset. And,
I'd like a ride.
Stand by, Vector 13659er.
What Nick didn't tell you is he's going to go report traffic at the end of the day tonight.
That's right.
All right.
I'm going to take a little trip up to northern Los Angeles and cruise down the 405.
Yeah, I don't have the coordination to do that. So
You're just in the chopper. Hey, Nick,
That's,
how's things up in the chopper?
As it was described to me, yeah, a helicopter is basically like, constantly trying to balance on the head of a pin. The whole time. It could be exhausting. So anyway, well, thanks again for coming on. And with this, we were going to call this episode In the Can. Until next time, this is the Helical Brew Crew. We're out.
Thank you for joining us on the Helical Brew. We're glad to have you with us. For more episodes, please visit our website at helicalbrew.com. That's helicalbrew.com.